In the overwhelming silence of an abandoned farm, a 50-year-old man, his shoulders heavy with the invisible weight of war, stared at his only home, an old rusty treehouse. He was a veteran, a hero, but the world had reduced him to a ghost. His mind was a battlefield, and the sound of a snapping twig made him relive the horrors of a past that refused to die. Without hope, without a job, and with his family miles away, he had hit rock bottom. But in the midst of his solitude, his faithful Dogo Argentino, Max, acted with urgency, scratching at the floor of the treehouse as if he were trying to unearth a secret. What was Richard's dog trying to tell him? What did he know that his owner didn't? Richard, trusting Max's instincts, removed a rusty panel, revealing a hidden compartment. What he found inside was more than just simple objects. It was the key to reconnecting with his past, honoring his grandfather's memory, and finally, rebuilding what he had lost. You won't believe what an old diary and a family photo can do to heal a broken heart. Before we continue, what country are you watching this video from? Leave a comment below. And if you are inspired by stories of hope and reconstruction, subscribe to the Wind Echo Untold channel. By doing so, you help spread the power of these journeys of overcoming adversity and show that no matter how far down you go, there is always a way back.
Richard Arvin, a man of 50, was not a stranger to fighting. He was a veteran of a war that had ended decades ago, but for him, the conflict never truly stopped. It lived on in the echoes of his mind, in the sudden jolt of adrenaline at a loud noise, in the cold sweat of a nightmare. The soldier who once stood tall and proud had been reduced to a fragile shadow of his former self. His trauma, a silent enemy far more cunning than any he had faced on the battlefield, had cost him everything: his job, his family, and his belief that a normal life was still possible. He had a family who loved him, but they couldn't understand the phantom war he was still fighting every day. The story begins with Richard at rock bottom. Having been evicted from his apartment, he had nowhere to go. His only option was to retreat to the forgotten family farm, a place of memories that now felt like a foreign country. He wasn't returning home. He was running from a world that no longer had a place for him. Here, amidst the overgrown fields and the ghosts of his past, he and his loyal companion had a destination. Their last refuge was a dilapidated structure at the heart of the property, a rusted and forgotten old treehouse, a symbol of childhood dreams, now serving as a shelter for a man with no hope. His only constant in this turbulent existence was Max, a magnificent, pure white Dogo Argentino. Max was more than a pet. He was a silent anchor in a world of chaos. While Richard's mind replayed scenes of violence and trauma, Max's calm and steady presence was a constant reminder of the present. He was a loyal shadow, a guardian who didn't understand the battles in Richard's mind, but knew with an unwavering certainty that his purpose was to stand by his side. Their bond was not of words, but of mutual trust and unspoken empathy, a connection forged in the fires of solitude. The old treehouse stood as a monument to decay. The stairs creaked under their weight. The walls were crumbling and the roof had a hole in it. It was cold, dark, and filled with the dust of generations. This was the only place Richard could turn to, a literal and metaphorical dead end. Here, stripped of all his possessions and his dignity, he was a prisoner of his past, his future as bleak as the inside of the rusted-out structure. The only thing they had was each other. As the sun set on their first night in the treehouse, the silence was broken only by the sound of Richard's ragged breathing. He sat on the floor, staring into the darkness, convinced that this was where his story would end. He was a man defeated, his spirit broken by a war that had followed him home. Little did he know that his Dogo Argentino, Max, was about to lead him on a journey that would not only transform their shelter, but would also show him the path to healing and a new life he never thought possible.
The first few days in the old treehouse were a blur of cold, damp misery. The structure offered little protection from the elements, and Richard's spirit was as broken as the rotting wood around him. He felt every ache in his bones, a constant reminder of his age and the hardships of his past. He had lost the will to fight, sitting in the silence with his head in his hands, ready to admit defeat. But Max, his faithful Dogo Argentino, was far from ready to give up. The dog began pawing insistently at a specific spot on the floor, his low whimpers a stark contrast to Richard's silent despair. Max's persistence was relentless, a force of will that commanded Richard's attention. Exhausted, but trusting the dog's instincts completely, Richard finally moved. He saw it then, a loose panel of wood, partially hidden by rust and dust. With a groan of effort, he pried open the old panel, the screech of metal a harsh sound in the quiet space. What lay beneath was a small, hidden compartment. The despair in his heart was replaced by a flicker of curiosity. It was a moment of true suspense, as if the treehouse was offering up a secret it had held for decades. Inside the compartment lay a collection of forgotten items. Among them was an old leather-bound diary, its pages brittle with age. Written on the cover, in elegant, faded script, was the name Arthur Riley, his grandfather. Next to the diary lay a faded photograph of two children, a boy and a girl, smiling brightly. Richard's heart seized. It was a photo of his own children from years ago. Tucked behind it was a small white hospital bracelet, the kind you receive after a child is born. Richard looked down at the name written on it, Ben Arvin. It was the bracelet from his son's birth. This was no random discovery. It was a treasure chest of purpose. His grandfather's words, a tangible connection to a man Richard had always admired, and the powerful memories of his own children were a jolt to his system. They were a sign, a message from the past reminding him of who he was and what he still had left to fight for. Richard, who had felt like a ghost, now held in his hands the very things he needed to feel alive again. The old treehouse, once a symbol of his failure, was now a vessel of hope.
As Richard turned the brittle pages of the diary, the words of his grandfather, Arthur Riley, seemed to leap off the paper and into his soul. His grandfather, a proud carpenter, wrote not just about the techniques of his craft, but about the profound dignity of building things with one's own hands. He wrote of pride in creation, of leaving a mark on the world that would outlast him. These words, filled with a gentle wisdom, were a stark contrast to Richard's own life, which had felt defined by destruction and loss. The diary was a lifeline, a message from the past, reminding him of a legacy he had forgotten he was a part of. Richard looked around the old treehouse with a new perspective. Where he had once seen only decay and a final desperate shelter, he now saw a purpose. This was a structure his grandfather had built. It was a testament to his family's history of resilience and craftsmanship. Richard realized he could do more than just exist within these crumbling walls. He could bring them back to life. He decided he wouldn't just live in the treehouse, he would transform it. He would honor his grandfather's memory by doing the one thing he knew how to do best: build. But his motivation was fueled by more than just a sense of duty to his ancestor. It was the faded photograph of his two children that truly sealed his resolve. Seeing their young, happy faces stirred something deep inside him, a desperate need to prove that the man they once knew was still there. He wanted to show them that he wasn't a failure, that he was still a father they could be proud of. The project became his path to redemption, a tangible way to prove his worthiness to them. With a new sense of clarity, the hopelessness that had clouded his mind began to recede. The physical act of rebuilding became a metaphor for rebuilding his own life. The despair was replaced by a quiet, focused determination. He saw a future where he could stand in a completed, dignified home and tell his children that he had built it with his own hands. The project was his first step back from the brink, a journey to reclaim not just a home, but his own soul. With a new purpose burning inside him, Richard began the monumental task of rebuilding the old treehouse. The work was arduous. He started with the basics:
scraping away decades of rust and decay from the metal frame. The harsh sound of steel on metal, a grating protest against his efforts. Then came the endless task of sanding the rotting wood, the fine dust settling on his skin like a second skin. It was backbreaking, unforgiving labor, a physical challenge that mirrored the emotional one he had been avoiding for years. Max, ever by his side, watched on, a silent partner in this grueling work. But in this repetitive, manual labor, Richard found an unexpected form of therapy. The simple, concrete tasks of filling holes, sealing cracks, and measuring boards quieted the storm in his mind, the chaos of his memories, the constant anxiety of his PTSD found no room in the focused concentration required to build. With every board he sanded and every nail he hammered, he was not just fixing the treehouse, he was fixing his own shattered focus. The work demanded his full presence, grounding him in the here and now, a feeling he hadn't experienced since the war. As the weeks turned into months, the treehouse began to transform. The crumbling walls were replaced with solid planks. Insulation filled the empty spaces, sealing out the cold and, symbolically, the world outside. The uneven floor became a smooth, level surface. With each completed task, a sense of quiet accomplishment swelled in Richard's chest, a feeling he had forgotten he could have. His body ached, but his mind was finally finding a sense of peace. The physical reconstruction of the treehouse was becoming the emotional reconstruction of the man himself. The treehouse, once a symbol of his defeat, was now a monument to his resilience. The dust of decay was replaced with the scent of fresh wood. The cold emptiness gave way to a nascent sense of home. Richard, once a ghost haunted by his past, was slowly, deliberately building his way back to the land of the living. He wasn't just building a house, he was rebuilding his life, one plank at a time.
The solitude of the farm was shattered one afternoon by the arrival of Richard's children. They had come to check on him, and their faces, once filled with concern, now held a mix of disappointment and confusion. They saw the half-finished treehouse and their father covered in dust and grime, and their hearts sank. To them, it wasn't a project of healing. It was a sign of regression. They believed he was giving up on his recovery, retreating into a childlike fantasy. Richard tried to explain the diary, the connection to his grandfather, and how the work was his therapy, but they couldn't see past the rust in the tools. They could only see a man they were afraid of losing to his past. The moment was filled with a painful silence, a wall of misunderstanding that left Richard feeling more alone than ever before. But as the sun began to set on that disheartening day, a new figure appeared from the neighboring farm. His name was Walter, and he was nothing like Richard's family. Walter wasn't concerned or disappointed. He was curious. He saw the craftsmanship in the new wood panels and the precision in the measurements. Instead of treating Richard like a patient to be managed, Walter treated him like a fellow artisan, a kindred spirit who understood the language of wood and metal. He spoke not of Richard's health, but of his project, of his skill, and the honest labor of his hands. Walter's simple presence and genuine respect were a balm for Richard's wounded spirit. The friendship blossomed naturally, a quiet partnership forged in the shared love of building. Walter would bring over tools, offer advice, or simply sit on a bench, appreciating the progress with a quiet nod. He didn't ask questions about the war or about Richard's past. He focused on the present, on the life Richard was building with his own two hands. This new connection showed Richard that his work wasn't just for him. It had meaning, and it was a source of connection with the world he had left behind. Walter's unwavering support gave him the confidence to continue, proving that while his family might not yet understand, his path to healing was real and visible to those who were willing to see it. It was a new kind of family, built on respect and understanding.
Months later, a car pulled up the dusty driveway once more, but this time, only one figure emerged. It was Ben, Richard's son, and his face no longer held a look of skepticism. The doubt had been replaced by a quiet,
determined curiosity. He had kept in touch with Walter and heard about his father's progress, and now he had to see it for himself. He walked toward the woods with a mix of trepidation and anticipation, unsure of what he would find. The emotional distance that had separated him from his father for years now felt more like a tangible chasm that he was finally ready to cross. Ben stopped dead in his tracks. The sight before him was astonishing. The decrepit, rusting old treehouse was gone, replaced by a beautiful, handcrafted home nestled in the branches of the old oak tree. The walls were straight, the windows gleamed, and a warm, inviting light spilled from the inside. He saw the meticulous detail in the joinery, the smooth finish of the wood, and the solid construction. This wasn't a project of a man giving up. This was the work of a skilled artisan who had poured his heart and soul into every single piece. In that moment, Ben finally understood. The building was not a retreat from the world, but a way for his father to find his place in it again. He saw that the true work was not the carpentry, but the inner healing. Ben looked at his father, no longer a patient to be pitied, but a man to be admired. He saw the courage it took not only to fight a war, but to come home and fight another one in silence. He saw a father who had reclaimed his life with his own two hands. Their reunion was not marked by a big embrace, but a simple nod of respect. Ben looked at the treehouse, then at his father, and for the first time in a very long time, he saw a future. The walls of the treehouse were solid, but the walls between them had finally come down. The house was not just a home for Richard, it was a bridge that had reconnected him with his son.
With the last nail hammered and the final coat of paint dry, the old treehouse was no longer a place of despair. It was a cozy, vibrant home. The windows, once boarded up, now let in the sunlight, filling the space with warmth. The walls that once crumbled were now solid, and the floor that was once dust-covered was a firm foundation for a new life. The treehouse, which was once a symbol of Richard's rock bottom, was now a powerful monument to his resilience and a testament to the healing that had taken place. The physical reconstruction was complete, but Richard knew the most important part of the journey was just beginning. The treehouse had been his catalyst, the project that gave him a reason to fight. But the ultimate goal had always been to rebuild his life and, most importantly, his family. The emotional walls between him and his children were the final pieces to be mended, and he was now ready for that monumental task. In the final scene of his private struggle, Richard sits inside the home he built. Max, his loyal companion, lies peacefully at his feet. The space is filled with a sense of calm and accomplishment. Richard pulls out a pen and paper. With a steady hand, he begins to write a letter to his children. The words are filled with honesty and love, not of a man who is lost, but of a man who has finally found his way back home. He is not inviting them to a house. He is inviting them back into his life. The journey of Richard, his dog Max, and the old treehouse is not just a tale of physical transformation. It is a powerful story about overcoming adversity, about the deep bond between a man and his dog, and about finding hope in the most unlikely of places. It shows that even when a life is shattered, you can always pick up the pieces and build something beautiful again. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of this story of hope and resilience touched you the most. And if you're inspired by tales of courage and unbreakable bonds, subscribe to the Wind Echo Untold channel. By becoming part of our community, you help spread the power of these journeys of transformation and ensure you won't miss any of our next inspiring stories.